What is going on, guys? It's Bucky with Chai Waves. Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to give you guys a full tutorial on how to catch flounder. I'm going to go over the basics 101 on what you guys need to know on how to target these fish, what is the best locations, lures, baits, gear, and tackle. And I want to make this video not too long, but I want to make this entertaining, but also educational for you guys. So I really hope the video helps you guys out, you guys enjoy it. And if you're not already subscribed to Chai Waves, I'd appreciate it if you hit that button. Let's go ahead and get into this video. All right, so flounder is one of my favorite fish to catch and eat here in the Chesapeake Bay, Virginia Beach area of Virginia. And flounder are extremely popular on the East Coast here, Eastern Shore, Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads, Chesapeake Bay area, where I'm located at. And we know flounder, they have a ton of different nicknames. We call them flounder here. Some people call them fluke. Some people call them doormats. We call the big ones that. And I've also heard one of the latest nicknames for flounder, the chameleons of the sea, of how good they are able to camouflage into the bottom of the ocean when it's sand or different type of mud bottoms that they're resting on. Now, I don't eat too much fried fish, but I tell you what, I don't think there is a better fresh fried meat than flounder. There's that white meat, extremely moist, has a great taste to it. So there's a lot of different ways you guys can cook it, but flounder are extremely popular. For me here in the Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, Eastern Shore area, I've done a ton of inshore flounder fishing. That's one of my favorites, from a small boat, or if you're on a kayak, or if you're from a pier. But also we do a ton of flounder fishing out in the Chesapeake Bay, out in the oceans. If it's on wrecks, it's on different type of structure, which kind of changes up obviously how you're targeting these fish. But flounder are awesome to catch. They're a lot of fun. Flounder are great fish to target, and they really start to come in some of the more inshore inlets, and then somewhat out in the bay and ocean for us around the March, April time frame. That's when the water's starting to slowly peak up. And then we can even have that bite go almost all the way to November, possibly December, which is obviously contingent based off water temperatures. But kind of your prime time, best time of the year to target these fish is kind of the summer time frame. Around May to August, maybe out to September, are the best months when targeting flounder. So one of the most important things you need to know prior to going out and targeting flounder is understanding the eating habits of flounder themselves. Ultimately, they are an ambush predator, and what I mean by that is they are motionless at the bottom of different inlets, if it's out in the ocean, on structure, on wreck, or whatever it is, and they ambush their prey. They're not like redfish or trout or bluefish, for example, inshore, where they're really starting to target more aggressive on these fish. They wait for a lot of these different types of finger mullet. If it's shrimp, it can be gudgeons, whatever it is, for them to swim by in different type of inlets. If it's on drop off, it's on wrecks, and then they ambush that bait very quickly. So understanding that they are an ambush predator is very key when targeting these fish, knowing what is the best baits to use, the best lures, gear, tackle, location, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. All right, so now that we've talked about some fun facts and basic information on flounder, next part that I want to talk about is understanding location and where to target flounder. The most important thing regarding where these fish are at is, one, is that they feel the most comfortable around structure. They're bottom feeders, right? So you got to expect to lose a lot of jig heads, a lot of hooks, because you're going to be bottom fishing for these guys, and they like structure. But don't worry about that. You got to expect to break off those hooks, pull them, tie back up, but get back out there. But some of the most primary and most popular locations and kind of generic is inshore inlets around oyster beds, grass beds, inshore rock jetties, different dips and drop-offs inshore, and then offshore it's around different types of rock structure. Wrecks is really popular, sunken ships, whatever it is. But flounder feel the most comfortable around structure, and I'm going to talk about each one of these locations. All right, so one of the first locations I'm going to talk about is rock jetties, and this is one of my favorite spots to target flounder, especially here if it's in Rudy Inlet, which is in Virginia Beach. There's a great jetty. But the structure and the different types of rock bottoms on these jetties house a lot of flounder, because one, it's where they feel the most comfortable, but it gives them a great opportunity to bury themselves under that sand, under that muddy bottom. But the reason why the rock jetty is so important for flounder is you have so many different type of microorganisms in the bait fish that these flounder like to ambush. So a rock jetty is a great location. I like to throw up somewhat close to the rocks. You got to be careful so you don't get hung up. But bottom fishing, if it's a 3/8 ounce jig head with a shrimp or a swimming mullet, and slow reels back in, bottom bouncing. I've caught some of my personal bests and great sized flounder off rock jetties. So that's the first location. All right, so the second location we're gonna talk about is inshore inlets, and specifically grass beds and flat muddy bottoms. And we have 2 inlets here in Virginia Beach, one really large, Lynn Haven, and one Rudy, for anybody who's local. But a lot of kayakers, a lot of boats, smaller skiffs like what I have. These are great locations to target inshore flounder. Flounder like sandy, muddy bottoms where they can bury themselves, camouflage in with their surroundings, and ambush these fish on these grass flats. The reason why these grass flats are so great is because you have so many different types, again, microorganisms. You have so much bait fish that is coming in and out of these grass beds at different tide levels. At a high tide, I love fishing inshore for flounder because you have so much different type of bait that are coming up in these grass beds and these flats, these muddy bottoms. So I love it. Incoming tide, high tide, going up, throwing up. It could be a popping cork. It can be a different type of jig head, a swimming mullet, whatever it is, live bait. But inshore inlets are great. Flat beds I really like. Another great location, which is still inshore, but somewhere I 100% recommend, is locating the drop-offs inshore. And what I mean by that is in our local inlets, you have a lot of areas on grass beds where it's 1.5 feet, maybe 2 foot. And then you're looking on your depth finder and it'll drop from 2 to possibly 10 foot, 15 foot. And that is a huge spot to look and target. The reason why these drop-offs are great is, one is because that flounder is trying to cool off in these summer months. It's got extremely hot water temperatures in 1 foot and 2 foot of water. So they're gonna head out to a little deeper water. But the reason why that is so important is if you have, let's say, a 2 to 10 foot drop-off, those flounder in that deeper water, and when you have bait fish that are coming around that drop-off and they come down into deeper water, that gives that flounder an opportunity to ambush. Again, if it's mud minnows, gudgeons, swimming mullet, shrimp, whatever that is. But I've caught so many big fish. Once I'm able to locate a lot of those drop-offs, I could fish possibly all day on different grass beds, oysters, whatever it is, and not catch anything. But as soon as I identify one of those drop-offs and start targeting with a bucktail, again, it could be jig head, whatever I'm throwing. Once you identify one of those drop-offs, 100% throw your anchor out, put out the trolling motor, and fish hard on those drop-offs, because that's definitely going to produce some nice flounder. All right, so we've talked about rock jetties, we've talked about inshore grass beds, flat areas, and drop-offs. And the next part I'm going to talk about is more related to people fishing out in the ocean or the bay, for us that is, and that is wrecks. And wrecks house the biggest flounder in at least the Chesapeake Bay. You get some nice sized flounder inshore. You can definitely land possibly 20 to 24 inch flounder, a couple inshore, which is nice. But once you get on these wrecks, this is what really produces these large doormats, is what we call them. Different types of wrecks in structure out in the bay in deeper water houses huge flounder. It's very popular if you're going out in Chesapeake Bay or Virginia Beach out to the ocean here locally, and you're going out to target flounder. 99% of people on charter boats or personal pleasure, whatever, are going to structure or going to wrecks, because that's going to house big flounder. And I would 100% recommend looking for these wrecks. You're gonna catch some flounder. All right, so now that we've talked about locations, the next part that we're gonna talk about in this video is what is the best baits and lures to throw. And the first thing that I'm gonna talk about is for more inshore, but probably the most generic setup and presentation you can use for flounder. And what that is typically use a 3/8 ounce or a 1/2 ounce jig head. And my kind of 2 go-to favorites are the Berkeley gulps, the swimming mullets, and the shrimp. This has been really kind of my go-to for years, and it's produced a lot of great fish. And again, this is primarily going to be used more inshore. This is going to be on the flats, drop-offs. This is going to be possibly around the rock jetties. But I like using a 1/2 ounce, kind of at the biggest, maybe inshore, but can use a 3/8 ounce. And this is just a really easy setup presentation. And this is just a straight bottom retrieval. It's going to be casting out. And really slow kind of retrieval in with some bottom bouncing. But most importantly, in any location, wherever you're fishing for flounder, is keeping this lure, this jig head on the bottom. Of course, when you're raising it up off the bottom, you will. But a lot of things that I see people make mistakes, they're out there and they're jigging it really quickly, a fast retrieval, like almost like for a trout or red. And it's not even at the bottom of the inlet or whatever type of location you're fishing. And it's 10 feet above a flounder and it's nowhere near the location. So what's really important is knowing of keeping this at the bottom. You're reeling in really slow. Again, flounder are ambush predators, so they want to see that thing kind of going real slow, bouncing up. You're retrieving in where they can strike that. But this is a great, easy bait and lure. 3/8 ounce, probably ½ ounce. You can go up to 1 ounce. That's a little big for inshore, but I would definitely highly recommend the Berkley Gulps. Swimming mullet is great, and I love the shrimp. The second bait that we're going to talk about, which is extremely popular inshore and offshore, is a bucktail. And this is what a lot of people use for flounder, more offshore on the wrecks, which is really popular. But you can use bucktails inshore, and a lot of people fish these differently. Some people just fish them with specifically the bucktail and the hook itself, or something that I like to do, which is kind of a, I don't say a trick, is I like to throw some type of artificial bait on here. And what my kind of go-to has been for the past couple years for bucktails is a 5.5 inch. This is a Berkley Gulp grub. So I like to give it a little better presentation. I'm not going to put it on there and waste it for you guys. But once in the water on wrecks, or if it's inshore, bucktails are great. This is again a bottom bouncer, if you will, too. And this gulp itself, this grub, gives it more of a natural look, kind of like a fish, and really catches those flounder's eye. A lot of times you'll retrieve back in, and sometimes those flounder are biting at that gulp's tail, which is a good sign, but that might be some type of scenario where you need to slow up your retrieval if you're reeling in too fast. But I really like bucktail. Now this is a 1 ounce bucktail. This is really pretty much all you need for inshore if you are fishing. If you're around docks, jetties, different piers, depending on tides and water movement, but a 1 ounce is typically going to be all you need. But when you're going off more outshore, when you're in a lot deeper water and you got a lot more stronger currents and water movement, I would recommend probably throwing something a little bigger, maybe 1.5 ounce, maybe 2 ounce. But it all depends. But bucktails are a great presentation to throw. But again, I would definitely recommend throwing some type of artificial bait on here. It just gives it more kind of a natural look and catches that fish's eye. But definitely would recommend bucktails targeting flounder. All right, the third different type of lure that we're going to talk about is different type of bottom rigs with a leader for flounder. And this is going to be used primarily more offshore on wrecks and deeper water. I wouldn't really kind of present this type of lure inshore, but this is a great actually bottom rig. And shout out to Aaron over at Savage 3 Tackle Company who actually hooked me up with this. Check those guys out if you guys need some of these. These are great. But this is a bottom rig with a leader on it. You can see it's got a two-way swivel up here. That'd be tied up to your main line, and then you would tie off your weight here. And this is great because it's kind of like a little teaser rig. It's got your spinning bead here in itself. It's got the fake squid, and this is very similar, almost kind of like a bucktail. I would put this type of presentation with a grub, some type of maybe swimming mullet, larger swimming mullet on this. But this is, like I said, going to be used out in deeper water. But the way you fish this is, I would put probably, again, depends on water depths and current, probably at least a 4 or 5 ounce weight on this. And what this is going to allow it to do is it's going to allow this squid and this bait to float against the water once that weight's on the bottom. And you're going to be dragging this along and bottom bouncing, but allows this to freely move through the water. And something that's really important when using these type of bottom rigs and really anywhere in flounder fishing is that you'll see people throw these out, maybe reel them or let them sit there. And it's very key for flounder of drifting and movement in the boat. And this is a perfect example of a type of lure that you need, very critical if you're out in the bay, if you're not on a wreck, but if you're just doing a drift, to throw this out there, raising it up and down. But these bottom rigs, this is great. Again, check out Aaron over at Savage 3 Tackle Company. But these are great options, again, to target flounder more offshore on wrecks and different type of structure. All right, the next type of bait or more kind of presentation that I would use when targeting flounder, which is not too common, but is a popping cork. And when I use this is typically more in shallow water, probably like 1 foot to 2.5 foot tops. And what you've heard me saying throughout this video, it's important to keep that bait and lure that you're throwing at the bottom. And it all depends on how big your leader is on this. I've got about 1.5 foot right now on this. This is 3/8 ounce jig head. But I really like throwing these popping corks around rock jetties or bridges if there's really shallow water. And I might not be right on the bottom bouncing this, but this pop and cork allows me to kind of work it out pretty quick from those jetties and those pylons, and maybe give you 3 to 6 inches off the bottom, but kind of some quick pops really catches that fish's eye. So this is a great option presentation. Again, more in shallow water. This is not going to be thrown out, of course, in 20, 30 feet of water, because you're not going to be able to get down to the bottom. But more shallow water, some quick jigs, and know the depth that you're working. This is a great setup. Again, this is 3/8 ounce jig head, and would probably throw on here a different type of swimming mullet, shrimp. You could even put on a live shrimp, and you can work a lot of different options with these popping corks. But this is not really the most popular way of catching flounder, but I definitely have. And if you're around maybe off the beach or off some marshes, fishing around pylon structure, you could definitely give this a shot, and this is a great option. All right, so the last lure and bait that we're gonna talk about is throwing live bait and or cut bait for flounder. That's very popular, especially inshore, and or if you're just getting out, throwing out some shrimp, if it's cut mullet, squid, whatever it is. And this setup is very kind of straightforward. You have a 2-way swivel there, and you'll have an egg ounce weight up here, and this could be this is only like 1/2 ounce, 3/4 ounce, I believe. And depending on where you're at, if you're out more offshore, you're going to use probably 2, 3, 4 ounce egg weight. Inshore, you're not going to need something as big. And this is a smaller leader here. This is like 8 inches, but I like to use somewhere around, that's a 2/0 snell hook right there. Some people use circle hooks. I don't really use those as much for flounder. But a fish finder rig like this is really straightforward. Allows you to put out, it could be live shrimp, like I said, finger mullet, gudgeons, mud minnows, squid. But this is the easiest and the best profile when throwing live bait or cut bait for flounder. And the last thing I want to talk about when we're talking about baits and lures, and probably the most important thing, regardless of whatever you're throwing, if it's cut bait, if it's artificial, is you never want to keep that bait sitting. And what I mean by that is a lot of people will throw out live bait, or they'll throw out a bucktail and they'll cast it out and just let it sit there. And that is the last way to catch flounder. It's very important to have that bait constantly moving. What I mean by that is not really quick retrievals or jigs, but you want that drifting off the bottom of the sand or the mud bottom. The reason why this is important is, like I said earlier in the video, flounder are not really too aggressive regarding chasing bait or a lure very far. Now, of course, they'll come up and hit something and ambush it, but just to throw out a bucktail or a live shrimp or a bottom rig or whatever it is and just let it sit out there and think flounder are going to come up and bite that is very unlikely, and or if you will, it's probably going to be one and done. So what is very important, if you're fishing bucktails, if you're fishing shrimps, if you're fishing bottom rigs, whatever it is, you want these bottom bouncing baits, lures, to be constantly moving. You're moving them, you're dragging them back in, you're bottom bouncing them slow, whatever it is, but you got to keep that bait moving. And it's very important, especially the #1 rule when we go out fishing out in the bay, offshore on wrecks, is that you're constantly moving the boat, you're drifting and or just moving your bait. If you're just bottom bouncing and just letting it sit there, you're setting yourself up for failure. So just know, whatever bait you're throwing, you want to be cognizant and understanding that to keep that bait moving, never let that thing sit too long. It's going to set yourself up for some success, catch some big flounder. All right, so the last part of this video that I want to talk about is understanding the best gear and tackle to use when targeting a flounder. For more inshore, I like to use somewhat of a 7-foot medium light quick action rod, and I like to use typically a 3000 series reel. Some people go up to a 4, which is a little big for me inshore, and some people go to a 2, which is a little smaller. So I'd recommend 7-foot medium light quick action rod, 3000 series reel, and I like to use 15-pound braided tests for inshore. Sometimes I'll go down maybe to 12, and probably tops would be 20 for inshore, but this is the best and probably the easiest presentation to use when targeting flounder, specifically inshore. All right, so when you're fishing offshore, if it's in the bay or if it's in the ocean, at least for us up here, I like using a 7-foot medium heavy rod. This is an ugly stick, and I like using a 5000 series reel. This is the Pin Wrath, which is a really good reel I like. And I like using somewhere around 25 to 30 pound braid, maybe 20 to 30. But when you get out into the bay, the oceans, you get larger fish, you might get into sharks on some of the wrecks and stuff. So I don't like using a really light braid test line like I would inshore. But this is a great profile. 5,000 is probably the biggest I'd go. I don't like going too much under that, just depending on, again, what you get into out there, but it gives you plenty of power to reel in those fish in a medium heavy, again, based off if you're fishing in 30, 40, 50 feet of water, and depending on the size of those flounder you catch, it gives you a really good opportunity landing some nice fish. So 7 foot medium heavy, 5,000 series, and probably 20 to 30 pound braided test. All right, guys, and that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and hopefully this gave you guys some good tips and advice to go out there, inshore, offshore, wherever you're at, to catch some nice flounder. Hope the video wasn't too long for you. I wanted to make it entertaining but educational for you guys. So again, hope you guys enjoy. If you're not already subscribed to Try Waves, I'd appreciate if you hit that button, hit the bell notification for all future content coming out on Try Waves. I appreciate it. I'll see you guys on the water.